Story 1 credited to Alex Martin. It was a Friday evening and I was doing what I always do, trying to clear my head after a long week of work. My routine was simple: lace up my sneakers, head out the door, and go for a run around the neighborhood. It's something I've done 100 times before, you know? My small suburban neighborhood in Indiana is the kind of place where nothing happens. Quiet, peaceful. At least that's what I always thought. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, and that cool autumn air was settling in. It felt peaceful. You know that moment where everything feels just right? The kind of quiet that wraps around you, where even the soft shuffle of your shoes on the sidewalk feels louder than normal. I always liked that feeling. That evening I took my usual route, up the main road, past the park, and then through the winding side streets. But about halfway through, something felt off. It wasn't anything I could point to right away, but you know when you get that feeling in your gut, like you're being watched? I shook it off, told myself it was just my imagination. But a few minutes later I saw it, a car, black, older model, sitting parked on the side of the road a few blocks ahead. I didn't think much of it at first because people park their cars on the street all the time, right? But then I noticed something strange. There was no license plate on the front. The windows were dark, maybe tinted, I don't know. But what really stuck with me was how still everything felt. It wasn't running, and I didn't see anyone inside. I kept jogging, keeping my eyes ahead, trying to ignore it. But as I got closer, I felt my heart speed up. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Just a car, nothing more. But still, I picked up the pace, trying to shake off the unease. I rounded the corner and headed into the quieter streets near the park. Fewer streetlights there, fewer people out. It was just me, the distant hum of traffic, and my breath in my ears. The air felt colder now, and that uneasy feeling was growing. I glanced behind me, half expecting to see someone there. Nothing. Just an empty sidewalk. But something felt wrong. I couldn't. I pushed through the last stretch of the park and came back out onto the main road, my house just a few blocks away. And that's when I saw it again, the black car. This time, it wasn't parked. It was moving slowly down the street, creeping along like it didn't belong there. No headlights, just the soft hum of the engine rolling past. My chest tightened. I thought about turning down another street, but then I told myself I was being paranoid. It's just a car, Jess. People drive all the time. But as I kept moving, so did the car. Slow, deliberate, keeping its distance, but always there. I was walking now, my jog reduced to a quick, anxious pace. My heart pounded in my chest, every step heavier than the last. I could feel my stomach tightening, that pit of dread settling in. I glanced over my shoulder. There it was, just a block behind me. It was like it was toying with me, always staying just far enough away that I couldn't be sure. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe it was all in my head. I pulled my phone from my pocket, my hands trembling as I fumbled to unlock it. My mind was racing. Should I call someone? But who? And what would I say? Hi, there's a car. That's following me? It sounded ridiculous, even to me. But as I neared my house, I saw the car again. This time it had pulled over, right near the entrance to my driveway. My heart stopped. I froze on the sidewalk, trying to figure out what to do. Should I run? Should I just walk past like nothing was wrong? The door of the car opened. I couldn't see who was inside, just a figure stepping out, tall, dressed in dark clothes. My pulse was in my throat now and I could barely breathe. I took a step back, but it felt like the world had slowed down. Every sound, the leaves crunching beneath my feet, the wind picking up, felt like it was happening in slow motion. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice shaky. "What do you want?" No response. The figure just stood there watching me. I didn't wait. I bolted up the steps to my house, my fingers shaking as I tried to get the key into the lock. My hand was trembling so bad I dropped them. I cursed under my breath, frantically grabbing them off the ground. Behind me I could hear the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. I finally got the door open and slammed it shut behind me, locking it as fast as I could. I stumbled back, breathing hard, and grabbed my phone. I dialed 911, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely hit the buttons. 911, what's your emergency? There's a man outside my house, I whispered, peeking out the window. Is he trying to break in? No, but he's been following me. He just got out of his car. He's just standing there. The dispatcher told me to stay inside and that they'd send someone. I hung up, my heart still pounding, and looked out the window again. He was standing in my driveway, not moving, just watching the house. I waited for what felt like an eternity. Minutes dragged by. Every noise made me jump. The sound of a passing car, the creak of the floor beneath my feet, even the ticking of the clock on the wall felt like a gunshot. Finally, I saw the red and blue lights flash outside. The police had arrived. I opened the door, explaining everything as quickly as I could. But when we looked outside, the man was gone. The car, too. Just vanished. The officer didn't seem too concerned. He said it was probably someone from a nearby neighborhood, maybe lost, maybe drunk. But I knew what I felt. I knew I wasn't imagining things. And now, every time I go for a run, I can't help but glance over my shoulder, because I know he's still out there. And next time, I might not be so lucky. Story 2 credited to Chris Miller. You ever have something happen that's so strange, so unsettling, that it sticks with you for the rest of your life? I'm not talking about a scary movie or some wild story someone told you at a campfire. I mean something real, something that shakes you to your core because it shouldn't happen. But it did. That's what I'm going to tell you about. This thing that happened to me, what I went through, it's been 3 years and I can't shake it. I've tried talking to people about it, but they just give me this look, you know? Like I'm making it up. But I'm not. And maybe telling it here will help me get some closure. Or at least make it real enough that I can stop replaying it in my head every night. So, this happened back in the summer of 2020, during the thick of the pandemic. Leah, my girlfriend, had just moved in with me. We'd been together for 2 years and figured, why not? I mean, with everything locked down, it made sense. Why pay 2 rents, right? Our apartment wasn't anything special. It was one of those older buildings in Cleveland. Decent enough, but kind of creepy at night. You know the type. Squeaky floors, thin walls, and that weird echo in the hallways that never seemed right. But we didn't mind. We were happy enough just being together. But it all started with this knock. Now, I know how that sounds, right? A knock? Big deal. But this knock wasn't normal. It was 3 a.m. and it was quiet as hell outside. I remember waking up thinking I'd heard something, but not sure if I was dreaming. And then it happened again. 3 knocks. Not loud, not frantic, just there, like whoever it was knew I'd hear them. I shook Leah awake. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. She just groaned and rolled over. She wasn't the lightest sleeper, so I figured it was nothing. But it stuck with me. I kept lying there, waiting, my heart beating faster than it should have. I told myself it was probably just a neighbor. But the thing was, it sounded like it was right at our door. The next morning I checked the peephole, the hallway, everything. Nothing was out of place. No one else in the building mentioned anything weird. I even thought about asking the guy across the hall, but what would I even say? "Hey, did you hear some weird knocking at 3 a.m.? I'd sound nuts. So I let it go. Leah laughed it off when I told her about it. She said I was probably dreaming, stressed out or something. I wanted to believe her. But a few nights later, it happened again. Same time, 3 a.m., 3 knocks. It was enough to jolt me awake this time. I got up, not thinking, just moving, and threw the door open. Nothing. The hallway was completely empty. No sounds, no movement, just that eerie silence that you only get in the middle of the night. I came back to bed and Leah was sitting up now, looking at me like I'd lost my mind. "Who was it?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. "No one," I said, feeling ridiculous. There was no one there. She didn't say anything. We just sat there in the dark for a while, not sure what to make of it. I could feel her staring at me like she was waiting for me to explain it, but what could I say? I didn't know what the hell was going on. For the next few days, I was on edge. Every night I braced myself, waiting for the knocks to come back, but they didn't. For a week, things were normal again. I almost convinced myself I had imagined the whole thing. But then one night, Leah woke me up before I even heard it. She shook me hard. "Chris, get up," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's happening again." I sat up groggy and listened. Sure enough, 3 knocks. This time it sounded deliberate, like whoever was knocking knew we were there, listening. I started to get up, but Leah grabbed my arm, tight. "Don't," she said. Her eyes were wide, like she was terrified of something more than just someone at the door. "What do you mean?" I asked. "We need to figure out who's doing this." "No," she whispered again, her voice shaking. "Don't open the door." I'd never seen her like that before. She wasn't scared easily, but in that moment she looked terrified. It freaked me out, to be honest. So I didn't open the door. We sat there listening, waiting, but nothing else happened. The knocking stopped after those 3 knocks. The next morning, Leah was quiet, distant. I tried talking to her about it, but she shut me down every time. She said she was just tired, stressed out from work and the pandemic. But I knew it was more than that. She barely slept, tossing and turning every night, waking up at 3 a.m., even when there were no knocks. It was like she was waiting for something. And then, one night, I woke up to find her side of the bed empty. It was 3 a.m. and Leah was gone. I called her name, checked the bathroom, the kitchen, everywhere, but there was no sign of her. That's when I noticed the front door was cracked open, just a little bit, like someone had left in a hurry. I ran out into the hallway calling her name, but there was no response. The hallway was empty, silent. I ran downstairs, hoping she'd maybe gone outside to get some air, but she wasn't there either. I called her phone, but it was still in the apartment. I was losing it at that point, panicking, not sure what to do. I called the police, told them she was missing. They asked the usual questions. Did we fight? Did she leave a note? But there was nothing. It was like she vanished. They searched for weeks. Nothing. No sign of her, no evidence. It was like she disappeared into thin air. The cops said there was no sign of foul play, no forced entry, nothing. They said she probably left on her own, but I knew that wasn't true. Leah wouldn't just leave, not like that. I moved out of that apartment a few months later. I couldn't stay there. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd hear those knocks. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate. And I'd wonder if I should have opened the door that night. If maybe, just maybe, I could have stopped whatever happened to her. I still wonder about it, every night. And every now and then when I'm lying in bed, I think I hear it, those 3 knocks, and I wonder, what would have happened if I had opened the door? Story 3 credited to Mark Whitman. I've never been the kind of person to buy into creepy stories. You know the kind. The ones where someone's being watched or there's something lurking just outside their window. That stuff always felt too far-fetched to me. I'm practical. I deal in facts and logic, and I've always thought fear thrives where there's a lack of reason. That's why what happened to me last fall messed me up so much, because there wasn't any reason to it, and it was terrifying. I live in the outskirts of Chicago, not far from where the city starts to fade into endless rows of houses and quiet neighborhoods. I'm not going to say it's the most exciting area. Things are quiet, peaceful even. A lot of families, some retirees. It's not a place where weird stuff happens, or at least I didn't think so. This all started last October. I'd just gotten out of a relationship that went south. We were living together, and when she left, the apartment felt huge, empty. I had all this space, and with her gone, it was too quiet. You get used to the noise, you know? Someone else moving around, talking, just being there. And then suddenly, nothing. Just silence. I didn't think much of it at first. I was kind of enjoying the freedom, trying to make the best of it. But I started to notice little things, small, random things, like my phone charger wasn't where I'd left it, or a glass would be in the sink when I swore I hadn't used it. I brushed it off, figuring I'd just been distracted or careless. I was still adjusting, after all. Then, one night I came home late. It was a Thursday, I think. I'd been working longer hours, trying to fill the time. I remember walking through the front door, flipping on the lights and seeing something on the kitchen counter that stopped me cold. It was my keys. Now that might not sound like a big deal, but here's the thing. I leave my keys on the counter. Ever. I've got this little hook by the front door where I hang them as soon as I come in. It's automatic, so seeing them there, it made my skin crawl. I stood there for a second, staring at them, feeling this weird mix of confusion and unease. I picked them up, put them back on the hook, and forced myself to shake it off. Maybe I'd been distracted, maybe I'd just forgotten. But that feeling, it stayed with me. The next day I was at work and I couldn't stop thinking about it. You ever get that nagging feeling like something's just off? I couldn't explain it, but I felt like I wasn't alone in my apartment anymore. Like there was something I was missing, something right in front of me that didn't add up. So that night, I decided to pay more attention. I made a point to walk around the apartment when I got home, checking everything. The windows, the locks, my stuff. Everything seemed fine. Nothing was out of place. But that feeling, the one gnawing at me, was still there. And then it happened. I was in bed, just scrolling through my phone, trying to wind down. It was quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear the hum of the fridge in the kitchen, the occasional creak of the floorboards. And that's when I heard it. A noise. Soft, but unmistakable. It was coming from the front of the apartment near the door. At first I thought I imagined it, but then it came again. It sounded like a light scraping, something brushing against the wood of the door. I froze. My mind started racing through the possibilities. Maybe someone was outside. Maybe it was the wind. But that didn't make sense. There was no wind. I checked the weather earlier and it was calm outside. I stayed perfectly still, listening. The sound stopped for a second, then started again. Just a light, slow scrape. I wasn't about to sit there and let my imagination run wild. So I grabbed the bat I keep under the bed and crept to the door. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears, but I forced myself to stay calm. I was trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was an animal, or maybe something had fallen against the door outside. It had to be something simple. When I got to the door, I held my breath and looked through the peephole. No one. Nothing. I stood there for a minute, just staring at the empty hallway. I could see the door of the apartment across from mine, the dim light from the hallway lamp casting long shadows. Everything was still. But then, right as I was about to move away, I heard it again, the scrape. Except this time, it was quieter, like it was coming from the apartment. I spun around, feeling my chest tighten. There was no way. No way someone could have gotten inside. I checked the windows, the locks. They were all secure, but the sound was real. It was happening, and it was close. I backed up, gripping the bat, and scanned the room. Every little noise seemed magnified. The hum of the fridge, the click of the ceiling fan, my own breathing. I didn't move for what felt like hours, just listening. But the scraping sound had stopped. Completely. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called the landlord. I made up some excuse about wanting to check the locks, maybe get some new security for the front door. He said he'd send someone out, but I could tell he thought I was being paranoid. I didn't care. I paranoid. For the next few days, things were quiet. No strange noises, no out-of-place objects. I started to convince myself it was all in my head, that maybe the stress of the breakup was getting to me. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. The final straw came one Saturday night. I'd been out with a couple of friends just trying to clear my head. When I got home, I walked in and immediately felt wrong. Like the air in the apartment was different, thick almost. I flipped on the lights and everything looked normal, but that feeling wouldn't go away. Then I saw it. On the dining table, right where I leave anything, was a note. A piece of paper folded in half. My name was written on the outside in handwriting I didn't recognize. My heart was in my throat. I didn't even want to touch it. But I had to know. I had to, so I opened it. All it said was, "I've been here the whole time." I left that night, packed a bag, drove to a friend's place, and never went back. I don't know who left the note, how they got in, or what they wanted, but I wasn't about to stick around and find out. I moved out a week later.